I think actually what it's trying to convey here when it says, if there are faults or there are mistakes of men, wherefore condemn not the things of God, meaning focus on the higher things here. Focus on the things of God. Why? Because that's ultimately what's going to allow you to be found spotless before the judgment seat of Christ. And it's interesting that it doesn't matter what they're trying to convey here is, it doesn't matter about the secular or the temporal, the worldly things that are being discussed or talked about in the Book of Mormon. Those don't matter. For instance, one of the early criticisms I heard of the Book of Mormon years ago, growing up in the South, was, it talks about horses. Well, we know horses didn't arrive in the New World until the Spanish came here. For a time, people couldn't argue that. Well, now we know that's absolutely not true. Like, there were horses here even before the Spanish were here that predated them bringing them over from Western Europe, And so as time goes by, there may be secular parts of the Book of Mormon that aren't proven true, but it doesn't matter, because what they're saying here is, don't focus on the things of men. Don't focus on those aspects of the Book of Mormon. Focus on the things of God that are contained within the Book of Mormon, because that fullness is there. And that's ultimately what how can you be found spotless before the judgment seat of Christ? You take upon yourself the fullness of his mercy and his grace. That's what's being conveyed in the Book of Mormon. You receive that grace, and then you can stand spotless before him. Those are the things the Book of Mormon's trying to get people to focus on.
What about goats?
Not getting into that conversation right now.
All right. And then we go into the introduction. Let's keep moving here.
Yeah.
We have the introduction to the Book of Mormon, which is a modern edition. And it's just kind of giving the person, the investigator, the reader who's new to the Book of Mormon, a broader overview of what it is and its purpose. And it says it's comparable to the Bible, meaning that it's a book of Holy Scripture. And then it says it contains the fullness of the everlasting gospel. Now, we have to be careful here, because there's easily 2 hours of content just in that sentence alone.
Well, we pretty much did another podcast almost on that exclusively. Yes. Yeah.
If you're interested in that, go to our Gospel Mysteries podcast.
Yeah.
We just spoke like an hour and a half on what that means, the fullness of the gospel. How does the Book of Mormon contain the fullness of the gospel? And long story short, it does. And it does in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways you can interpret that, and there's a lot of different things that means. And we actually we just briefly touched on some of that just now, and that the doctrine and the principles and what it represents, that all plays a part in being the fullness of the gospel, in teaching the gospel and the doctrine, but also in pointing the reader to the correct place and organization of the priesthood, and where the fullness of salvation can be found, where those ordinances, that authority is available to us. And for this purpose, Joseph Smith said that it's the keystone of our religion, and that we could get nearer to God by abiding by its precepts than by any other book, because it teaches the doctrine correctly and completely in a complete context, and through the lens of a people and a church that actually was applying all of them correctly